What's up, YouTube? So, have you ever heard of the phrase, "You're pretty for a dark-skinned girl"? Have you guys ever heard of that phrase? Have you guys ever heard it in your day-to-day life? Has someone said the phrase directly to you? Um, Me personally, I've never heard it in my day-to-day life, and of course, obviously, no one has would direct a phrase like that to me. Nevertheless, I'm do of course, definitely take issues with the phrase, but also I wonder about the origins of this phrase. Like, where did this even come from? Like, because this phrase, there's a lot that's packed into this phrase that I think that maybe, I don't know, people who say it, either they're intentionally trying to be shady, or either they're just really ignorant and perhaps have some sort of a skin tone bias or some sort of a make a correlation between skin tone and beauty, you know. But wherever it comes from, I think we as a community, we need to dead this phrase, right? This phrase needs to be completely eradicated from the community. Like, if you say this phrase, like, you need to do some jail time, right? Yeah. Or at least be shamed by the entire community, all groups and all facets of the community. Because, this phrase should not even exist. This phrase really shouldn't even exist. And also, I'm like, again, where did this phrase come from? Like, who pushed or who made this up? From what I'm gathering, or from what I heard, hearsay, all that good stuff. A lot of times I hear it like, the dark-skinned women complain, not, well, saying that, this phrase usually, they tend to hear it from dark-skinned men, which is, very odd to hear a phrase like this coming from essentially their male counterpart, who essentially has more or less the same features as them, except for they're just male and the other person is, of course, like the gender differences, right? Or sex and gender differences, you know. But a lot of is packed into that phrase, into that, um, I don't want to say a saying, but into that phrase, because it does imply, it makes a strong implication, right? It's implying that you know, you're kind of like saying that this dark-skinned woman is the exception to the rule. Like, usually, like, the dark-skinned girls aren't pretty, but you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl, though. And also notice that there's no male equivalent to this. Honestly, there's no dark-skinned male equivalent to this. There is a light-skinned male equivalent to this, though. You know, and it kind of goes something along the lines of like, oh, I'm not usually into light-skinned dudes. But yeah, women saying like they're not usually into light-skinned dudes, but this light-skinned dude just happens to kind of catch their eye a little bit. So, and he's kind of like the exception to the rule. But I'll say, even in that phrase, though, at least they're just saying, to them, right? To them, and just their preference, right? And ultimately, I can't knock people for having preferences and attractions and things like that. You like what you like. I can't knock you for that. You know, as long as there's no like colorism or something like associated with it. You know. While you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl, that phrase tends to just say like, as a rule generally across the board, and just common knowledge that, They're not so pretty. Yeah, the dark skinned girls aren't so pretty. So yeah. But yeah, a lot of times I've heard that this comes from dark skinned men. You know, and not to say that other folks don't use the phrase because they probably do. But I tend to hear the women saying that it comes from the dark skinned men. And, I think that makes it sting a little bit more when it's coming from your own, especially, the men that you feel like should have your back, you know, and support you and uplift you, right? Like I said, there's no dark skinned male equivalent to this, and there's also no light skinned female equivalent to this either. People don't say, when have you ever heard someone say, oh, you're pretty for a light skinned girl? Or even, oh, you're pretty mediocre for a light skinned girl, or you're pretty ugly for a light skinned girl. You're a pretty basic light skinned girl, honestly. People usually don't even say that, even when the light skinned girl ain't that pretty. People even don't say that, you know. you know. But honestly, the phrase, "you're pretty for a dark skinned girl" is, it's disgusting. It's also disturbing. And honestly, if anybody's defending this phrase, you know, they need to be canceled too. They need canceled and eradicated from the community. But I want to put it out there. Have you guys, particularly the dark skinned females, this question? Have you guys ever, has someone ever said this phrase to you? And also to the other folks out there, but especially the dark skinned men. Have you ever said this phrase to a dark skinned female? And as for me personally, thankfully this phrase was never a part of my vocabulary. Um, I don't think I've ever heard this phrase, like in my neighborhood where I grew up in, or the schools I went to, or my family, or anything like that, really. Um, and as well, like in my neighborhood and schools and stuff, like you know, the dark skinned girls definitely got play. In fact, like the hot teacher, I know the hot teacher in high school. Um, she was like a dark skinned woman. Like she wasn't no race, wasn't light skinned, you know, wasn't peanut butter, wasn't even a brown skin. She was a dark skinned woman, and a lot of the like students, the male students who were really like digging her, were dark skinned male students. You know. However, she did say, she definitely looked good. Miss Jackson, and she was also like, if you said, "Oh, sorry, Miss Jackson," that Outcast song, she was not feeling that. All right, she was not feeling that. I think she might even like write you up or something if you did it. But she did say that she did like she grew up in Ohio and she did go through some things as far as like issues with her skin tone, as far as like um, self-esteem is concerned and things like that. And she's a beautiful woman. You know, beautiful skin tone. You know, but she did say that she did experience some issues that was because of her skin tone. However, she did say that when she had moved down to, from Ohio to our area where we live in, down south, she did say that, she did feel like she received a lot more love as a dark skinned woman. You know? And this stuff can be regional because I'm kind of learning that myself because some people saying some things are like this and some things are like this where they live, some things like this where they live. It depends on the I think region does play a factor in this stuff. I try to make this stuff not region specific, although I do reference the region that I live in, you know. Yeah. Like in some regions, I think interracial dating is more prevalent than in other regions, as well. I think in some regions, you're more likely to find, double chocolate couples, like, brown skin and dark skin folks together as couples in certain regions. And as well, even some regions, maybe like, you might even find more like light skin mixed and biracial people even together, you know, you know. And then other regions, it's like a mixture where it's like, folks are kind of like, mixing it up, And as well, I think a generational thing may be at play too sometimes, because I had a um, a person comment saying like, oh, it seemed like the women in my area tend to go, the brown skin, dark skin women tend to go for light skin, biracial mixed dudes, and I'm like, really, and we actually live in like the same or more or less the same area. Not exactly the same area, but like the metropolitan area, though. You know, he likes south side. He's on the south side. I'm on the east side. But I think that may perhaps be a generational thing. Cause I'm like, I think this time, like, at least in my generation, it seems like the brown skin, dark skinned females are really open to the brown skin, dark skinned men. But perhaps, maybe I'm missing something. But like I said, like in my area, you do tend to see, a lot of like, brown skin, dark skin folks together as couples. And folks saying that, black love is, doesn't exist. And low key, I kind of feel like oftentimes, like the light skinned mixed biracial folks just tend to just maybe gravitate towards the brown skinned, dark skinned folks, right? But I'm going to bring this video to a close. I don't want to go on for too long, but I just wanted to put this out there and see what you guys think. So, let me know in the comments section. Have you ever heard this phrase? Have you ever used this phrase? Has someone ever used this phrase towards you? Let's talk about it. And until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.